I'm going to tell you the story about a poor couple, a husband and wife who were so poor they owned only two spoons, one spoon for the husband and one spoon for the wife. Their neighbor, on the other hand, was a rich man. His big house was filled with fine furniture, and the rich man was very proud of all his money and all his possessions and his extravagant way of living. Well, one year the poor couple had the good fortune to have a baby. And the woman said to her husband, "Maybe you should ask our neighbor to be godfather to our baby." The man said, "Oh no, he's so rich and we're so poor. Why would he want to be our compadre?" But the woman said, "You don't know. Maybe he'll accept." So the poor man went and asked the rich man, and to his surprise, the rich man did accept. They took the baby to the church and they baptized it. So now the neighbors were compadres. So one day the woman said to her husband, "You know, now that he's our compadre, we should invite our neighbor to join us for dinner." The man said, "We can't. We only have two spoons." So they didn't invite the rich man that day, but they started to save money, one penny at a time, until finally they could afford to buy a third spoon. And then the poor man went and invited the rich man to come for dinner. The poor woman got busy and she made a delicious soup. When the two men arrived at the house, she led the rich man to the place with the shiny new spoon. She said, "This is where you sit, compadre. You get to use our new third spoon." The rich man could hardly believe what he was hearing. He said, "What? Do you mean to tell me that you have only three spoons?" The poor man said, "Yes. Up until this morning, we only had two of them. We bought a third one so that you could join us for dinner." When the rich man heard that, he couldn't keep from laughing. "Oh, you had two spoons and you bought a third one so that I could join you? Do you know what? I own so many spoons, I could use a different spoon each day of the year if I wanted to." The poor man was a little bit embarrassed and a little bit angry at his rich compadre for bragging like that. But the woman spoke right up and she said, "Oh, that's nothing, compadre. Our friend uses a different spoon for every bite he eats." The rich man didn't believe that. He just shook his head. But the poor man knew what his wife was talking about. He said, "That's true. Our friend uses a different spoon for every bite he eats. He never takes two bites with the same spoon." The rich man was so upset by the idea that maybe someone could live even more extravagantly than he did, he couldn't enjoy his soup. That night he couldn't fall asleep, just thinking about it. And then the next morning the rich man's servant came running to the poor people's house. He said, "What did you give my master to eat for supper last night?" The poor man said, "He ate the same thing we did. It was the most delicious soup my wife has ever made." The servant said, "Well, your soup must have driven him crazy. This morning at breakfast, he insisted on using a different spoon for every bite he ate. He would eat one bite with a spoon, and then he ordered me to get rid of it." The poor man smiled to himself. That's exactly the sort of thing he expected from the rich man. He said to the servant, "What did your master tell you to do with the spoons you're supposed to get rid of?" The servant said, "Well, I asked him, and he told me, 'Give them to my compadres. They only have three spoons.'" And sure enough, later that morning the servant came back, and he left a pile of spoons beside the poor people's house. At noontime that day, the same thing happened. The rich man had to have a different spoon for every bite. And at dinner, it happened again. At the end of 1 week, the servant told the rich man there were no spoons left in the house. The rich man said, "Well, buy me some more. Do you think I'm too poor to buy spoons?" The servant went to the town and bought all the spoons in town. And then he had to travel to other towns to buy spoons. The rich man started selling his land and his horses and cattle just to buy spoons. A mountain of spoons was growing beside the poor people's house. At the end of a year, the rich man had spent his entire fortune on spoons, and there were only 3 spoons left in his house. That day he went running to the poor people's house and pounded on the door, and he told them, "You lied to me. No one can use a different spoon for every bite he eats. I have proved it. I was the richest man for miles around. Not even I could do that." The poor woman said, "You're mistaken, compadre. Our friend really does that." And the man said, "It's true, day in and day out, year in and year out. He uses a different spoon for every bite he eats." The rich man said, "You'd better introduce me to this friend of yours." So the poor people took the rich man to the nearby Indian pueblo, and they went to the house of a friend of theirs. The Indian man and his wife greeted the compadres and invited them to come inside and have something to eat. The rich man said, "That's exactly what I came here for. I want to see you use a different spoon for every bite you eat." The Indian man said, "Spoon? That's the only spoon I ever use." And he pointed at a stack of tortillas on the table. He picked up a tortilla, he tore a piece from it. With the piece of tortilla, he picked up some beans, and then the beans and the spoon disappeared into his mouth. The poor man said, "See, he'll never use that spoon again." Once again, the rich man was so upset he couldn't enjoy his meal. He got up from the table and he walked home sadly. But the poor people enjoyed every bite they ate with their friends, spoon and all. And then they walked home smiling, because they knew when they had sold all the spoons the rich man had thrown away, they would live the rest of their lives in comfort. But do you think they were stingy and mean after they got all that money? No, they continued to be kind and generous. You should go visit them. They don't even know you, but that doesn't matter. They'll greet you kindly. They'll invite you to come inside and have something to eat. And they'll give you a spoon for every bite you eat.